I think we're going to get started. Anyone close by wants to take a seat? All right. Well, this is our talk for Seattle Design Festival, Playing with Design, on creating Goopy Mag.
We're going to be taking you through who we are, why we decided to make a magazine, how we made the magazine, and then we're going to be having a panel with some of our contributors, asking some questions. We're going to have a little Q&A, and then we'll be taking you through a little design activity.
Great. So meet the Goopy Girls. That's me and Kaylee. In 2021, we decided to combine my love of writing and Kaylee's love of visuals into a creative studio called the Goopy Girls.
So I'm Kaylee. I did all the design and layout for the magazine. I'm a graphic designer, and I love working on print projects of all kinds. I love publication, packaging, also branding and design in the digital realm. I've always loved like art magazines and art books, so it's kind of a dream of mine to design a magazine. Yeah, I've done a lot of publication projects in the past, one of them being the Other Almanac. It's kind of a take on the old Farmer's Almanac, an updated version. So I learned a lot about publication and the whole process of self-publishing through that.
Great. Thanks, Kaylee. I'm Elise. I'm the head of writing and operations for the Goopy Girls. And so I am also a freelance marketer, journalist, and editor. And so I did a lot of behind the scenes work and also creative direction working with Kaylee. So the two of us have been a great team. I have a podcast called Vocally Fried. It's a pop culture podcast. And I've also been really excited to be involved in Arcade, which is a print and digital publication in the Seattle area. And I'm able to do editorial and journalistic work with them. All right, you're probably asking why Goopy. When I was in college, my friend Lucy would always call me a Goopy girl because I was constantly spilling on myself. So when Kaylee and I met, we wanted to create a studio that was known for maximalism, mess, sexuality, and playfulness. And the term Goopy Girl just seemed to stick and resonate with both of us.
Yeah, so we started this kind of creative collective called Goopy Girls as an outlet to kind of do our fun, maximalistic, like bold design and projects. So pretty much just everything we weren't able to do at work. So it was a good outlet for that.
Good outlet. Great. So we created a print magazine, Goopy Mag. There's some here, and there's also some sitting on chairs if you want to flip through it. It's kind of hard to see the screen right now, so probably easier if you just flip through the physical copy. But we created a magazine centered around play with games, activities, and things like that, because we noticed that adults really just don't play enough in their daily lives. At the first event that we got to release the magazine at was at the Seattle Art Book Fair, which was an amazing event. And we basically, when we table, we have like this fuzzy green tablecloth out and then a bunch of little toys and trinkets and things to fidget with. And all of the kids would come up and just start playing with things, touching the fuzzy blanket, things like that, and just kind of playing with our things. Adults would also come up and nervously ask if they were allowed to touch things or allowed to play with the fidgets. Once we said yes, enthusiastically, they would start playing. So what we learned through that experience was basically that adults do want to play, but it feels like it's not socially acceptable or it's not a part of adult life. And so I think that was just a really good learning experience. Kaylee and I also worked at Tiny Trucks Outdoor Preschool, shout out my mom's preschool, this summer. And it's a play-based preschool. And all the kids did was imaginary play for, 4 hours a day. And that's really all that kids do. And so what we learned through that was that play is really just a natural, inherent part of life. And at some point, we're told that it's not acceptable or that you're not supposed to play. You're supposed to be serious, focus on work. And so we kind of want to bring play back to adulthood. And so when we asked for submissions for this magazine, we asked people to represent what play looks like in their daily lives. And so for some people that was having a drag persona, for some people that was sexual play, for some people that was dress up or writing stories about imaginary worlds. And so the magazine really is different interpretations of the concept of play as an adult.
So Elise and I have always loved doing projects together. Before the creation of Goopy Girls even. A lot of our shared interests could easily be described as childlike play activities. For example, we love doing little dress-up parties, little skits. We even planned a few very extravagant parties. We planned a full-on circus with performances not once, but twice. So when we decided to make a magazine, the theme of play seemed like a very obvious choice.
Yeah, definitely. And we also were both really inspired by different magazines and publications that are dedicated to keeping print alive. When we met, we both had extensive book and magazine collections, so it was kind of just a common interest. Something we both definitely feel is that we were working remote jobs. We were on our computers all day, and then we'd get off the computer and start scrolling on TikTok. And so there's just so much screen time. And we think it's really sad that print is dying. And so part of our mission is really keeping print alive. And we really feel that part of joy and play is also just having tactile things to hold in your hand. And I think in a world that's just filled with screens, it's really important to kind of sit down on the couch, wherever, and look through something physical. I think it kind of grounds us back to reality.
So shortly after Elise and I met and we decided we wanted to start doing some more creative projects together, we started doing a visual identity for Goopy Girls, our creative collective. And we really wanted to express our brand voice of being very maximalistic, bold, playful. So we started with some very colorful color choices, experimental typography. And for kind of our logo here, you can kind of see some early process, but I started with kind of adding some more goopy effects, kind of in Photoshop, and experimenting with those, and then taking it back into Illustrator and creating our final vector lines for the logo. We also have some early process for colors and typography up there, and then you can kind of see our final brand guide up there.
Yeah, and so kind of how did we launch it? After creating the brand guideline with Kaylee, making sure we had the colors, font, and logos that we needed, it was time to call for submissions. So we did that on Instagram. You can see over on the right over there, we put out a call for submissions. We also went after some lovely local artists, some that may be here today, and really wanted to go after some local artists and support their art career, and also make sure that they were kind of people that were in line with the vision of play and playfulness. And so after the submissions, we created a master doc on Excel. As the head of operations, I do a lot of that organizational work, and it allowed me and Kaylee to work out of a giant document. And through that document, we did a lot of curation. So putting art together with writing submissions and figuring out the layouts, figuring out really just what the order of the pages are. And so there was a lot of just kind of mixing with the columns, mixing with the rows, and making sure that we were able to kind of have a nice natural flow. If you're flipping through the magazine, something that we did is we had submissions or pages that were really busy, and then we would have kind of a break page. And so there was a lot of, it's very intentional the way that we really laid out and ordered all of the pages. So, yeah, we were able to really start getting moving. And something about Goopy Mag that we're really excited about with it being play-based is that it's also an interactive magazine. And so what does that mean? At the top, you'll see Highlights magazine and a paper doll. So, when you're young, there's a lot of magazines at the doctor's office or things you get as gifts that are really things that you can interact with. And so we wanted to include Mad Libs, coloring pages, bingo. We have a tattoo doll where you can cut out tattoo. We got flash tattoo from some different tattoo artists that you can cut out and glue onto the doll. We also have a quiz. So it's kind of like an adult activity book. And that was something we were really excited about, was really bringing some joy back to the page. All right, so here is an article that both of us are really proud of and love. It's called Lovely Lolita. We approached our friend Akila, who is really passionate about Lolita fashion. It's a Japanese street fashion subculture known for really girlish style, frills, light colors, and big skirts and bows. And so it definitely is an example of play as an adult. It's also street fashion, so it's meant to be seen. And so we wanted our photo shoot to be something that was really public. And so I kind of pulled together some photos of models in grocery stores, because it felt like a really nice juxtaposition of this kind of over-the-top frilly outfit in this kind of mundane classic grocery store. And so we put together a mood board. Our friend Will Charlie, who's an amazing photographer, took these photos and edited them. And then also part of our creative process is that I would create mood boards on Pinterest and some kind of ideas for Kaylee to work off of, like color scheme. And I was really inspired by a lot of Japanese magazines for this one, since it is a Japanese street fashion. We kind of wanted to do a nod to that cutesy kind of 90s, early 2000s Japanese magazines. And also lots of bows and frills. And so this was the final result. Super happy with how it came out. So that was kind of some background on the process. And yeah, I love the photo, if you can see it, of Akila with the cakes, because they kind of match the style of her dress. And so after I gave Kaylee that mood board and we executed the photo shoot, she was able to take that and then design it. And then afterwards, we'll kind of critique it together and make some changes. Cool. And then another thing to go over is our Jell-O cover. Our photographer is present tonight. My lovely partner, Ryan, over there, took the cover art. So talented. And so you can see some kind of inspiration at the top. We found a lot of pictures on Pinterest. We use Pinterest for a lot of things, of kind of close-up photos of Jell-O that you can't really tell what's going on. And we just love that look and felt very goopy. And so basically, Kaylee and I spent the day making Jell-O, some of it edible, most of it not super edible. And then Ryan is very passionate about macro close-up photography, so he took a lot of close-up photos. You can see on the far my right, I guess it's everyone's right, over there, just my camera roll, like thousands of photos of Jell-O that we were taking and some process photos. And the end result, you can see in front of you. We were super happy with how it turned out. It's very, I think my favorite part about it is it looks like 3D. It looks like it's popping out at you, and it's very tactile, which we're really passionate about, tactile and being able to touch things and really interact with things. And then we were able to use it for this article, Getting Gooey. Kaylee did a lot of fun design, editing the photos of our hands playing with the Jell-O, again, very tactile. And
and we also, we didn't know that we were going to use those photos for that article, but once we started writing the article, or at least was writing the article, it kind of made sense, and it was pretty perfect.
Yeah, so it's kind of part of the process. Is a lot of things were not really planned, and they're kind of happy accidents, which is a form of play, we believe. So, yeah. All right, and so actually making the magazine happen. One reason that people don't do print anymore is it's super expensive. And so we had to figure out how we were gonna fund this, as we had never really done anything on this scale before. It was hard to get grants, hard to get funding for it. So we made an Indiegogo campaign, and that was super successful. We both work in marketing professionally, so that definitely helped us get more money. And we were able to actually crowdfund the amount to have a printing cost. We had a fundraising party, which helped get kind of the final push of budget in there. And then February of this year, we sent the magazine to the printers. There's a lot of back and forth, a bunch of edits go in when you're working with a printer, make sure that everything looks good. And then in May, the magazines arrived. We were so excited. after 2 years of work. And then in June, we had our release party. And then this summer, we've been really focusing on distributing it. We've been able to get it in a magazine store in New York, Toronto, Chicago, a bunch of places here. And so it's been super exciting being able to get it not just nationally, but internationally. So, if you know anyone who works at a bookstore, let us know. But yeah, we're independent. And so there's it's really just the two of us emailing people and, DMing them on Instagram and kind of doing whatever we can to get their attention. So yeah, it's very exciting to be in this final stage of really just getting the magazine out there.
So I thought I'd talk through a few of our favorite spreads. One being the table of contents or contents of table. I wanted to do kind of a play on words and do something that felt really messy and goopy. So a disorganized table seemed quite right. So it's kind of depicting like a workspace that maybe Elise and I have been in before, a little messy. And then this next one, Elise, if you want to.
Yeah, I can talk about, if you have a magazine in front of you, it says, "All work and no play makes Goopy a sad girl," which is a reference to the famous line from The Shining, "All work and no play makes Johnny a sad boy." And basically, the way that this came to be was Kaylee is an amazing designer, but sometimes she's a little too focused on design. And so she was getting a little experimental with my text and articles, and it was becoming unreadable. So something we were talking about is like me kind of giving her creative direction, allowing your designers to play. Like if they're doing something that you don't like, kind of redirect them. And so I was like, you can do a page or a spread that's all typography and you can mess with the words. And in The Shining, it's known for basically kind of a creative project that's gone downhill. He's like, spoiler alert, he says he's writing a book, but he's actually just writing the same line over and over and over again. So that felt very appropriate in this context of writing the same line over and over again. She was able to go crazy with typography. And it felt like also the perfect quote because it's also about like all work and no play makes you very sad. And so it felt like it was kind of like a full circle moment of like, oh, this is the perfect quote to repeat over and over again. So that was a fun collaboration we had there.
Yeah, really understanding The Shining.
Really deep Shining.
Yeah, and then this next page is from the article Throwing a Hissy Fit with our friend Casimir, who's a drag artist. And for the title page, I really wanted to kind of learn and try to figure out how to use Blender, which is a 3D software. That's what I use to make the inflatable text. And some of Casimir's looks are very like circus-esque, kind of, crazy. So it felt appropriate to do like kind of something that felt like a circus tent blown up or something. Well, I don't know, just something crazy. And then the next spread is also from that same article. It's one that kind of has like a Candyland-esque vibe. I kind of came about this because Casimir's outfits are kind of all over the place, very theatrical, and it kind of feels like you're going on a journey with his performances. So I thought it would be interesting to have a little nod from Candyland. You're kind of going on this whole experience watching Casimir's drag performances. Yeah. And then the next article features one of our panelists that you'll meet. And it's an article that I thought of and Elise wrote, and it's about what if women, instead of having children, laid eggs. Very weird topic, just kind of random, but the art just felt very like almost maternal and like comforting, so I thought it went with the article really well. And I wanted to include some colors and graphics that kind of reminded me of like a baby nursery, almost kind of like gentle, soothing. And then the last one I'll talk through is from Finding Frogs, an article written by our friend Elizabeth. She's always loved frogs. It's definitely one of her personality traits is just frogs, which is amazing. But she went on a trip to Tanzania to find basically new species of frogs, which was really cool. But I wanted the frogs to look like they were maybe jumping around the lines of text through the whole spread, and kind of create some movement there and guide you through the actual quote on the spread.
Yeah, and I think something that was really exciting about this is we have a lot of friends who are like scientists, photographers, writers, all across the board, and we wanted to really be able to include work from all kinds of different practices and also highlight work from a bunch of different friends of ours. Great. Well, that is the end of our presentation. We're about to have a panel. Are there any questions that come to mind about anything we just talked about? Feel free to raise your hand. Right now, I'll have Lydia and Julian come up, our panelists who are our amazing contributors.
All right, out of the front if we want to.
Yeah. Wait. Great. A little intro. Lydia Jewel-Gerard is a Tacoma-based visual artist and pole dance instructor, and she has just an incredible sense of vision. We use her for that fragile beginnings. We loved her egg motifs that felt appropriate. And she really has, if you flip through, really an ethereal sense of art, very dreamlike scapes. And something that I was kind of talking about was the flow of the magazine. So we had a lot of kind of crazy maximalist magazine spreads, and Lydia's art kind of felt like a breath of fresh air, or like a pause. And so we used that a lot kind of in between some of the more crazy spreads to have something that was sort of a break for the eyes to kind of reset. And so, yeah, we met randomly at a bar once, and she's an incredible local artist. So thanks so much for coming. Julian Pena lives and works in Seattle and was the 2-time recipient of the South Sound Magazine Best Artist of the Year. His work is super surrealist, also very maximalist, really goes along with our vision. We did a multi-page spread on him called Playing in Utopia, and kind of how he creates these magical, almost dreamlike scapes in his art. Very surreal. You know, you have a cat with an octopus on its head, so things you might see in a dream, or if you're in an altered state of mind. And so it felt like a really appropriate, he's mostly a painter, but also does other kinds of visual art, and just felt like very appropriate for the vision of our magazine. So thanks for coming. And then Kaylee, who most of you have met, our incredible designer and layout person. She's super talented, all about color. As you can see by her outfit, hair and makeup is usually very neon and colorful. And so she's also going to be on the panel. And I'm just going to ask them a few questions, and then we also will take questions from the audience if you want to just raise your hand and ask them a question. Let's start out by just introducing yourself, your background, and how you got to where you are today. Lydia, if you want to start.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for coming to celebrate the Goopy Girls magazine and get to know us a little bit. My background is in what I would call like experimental studio arts. Studio arts being anything that's like made in an art studio, so painting, drawing, ceramics, and the experimental aspect of that being finding new ways to use those traditional mediums. I kind of got where I am now through a lot of playing around, and you know, any artist's career has many chapters to it, but I have studied and also experimented. And I think at this point in my artistic career, I'm just really enjoying connection to the Seattle art community and finding a lot of that play and experimentation in just everywhere I go and people I meet in this creative community.
Hello, my name is Julian Pena. I wanted to thank Kaylee and Elise for this opportunity too, and being able to connect with everybody here. I hail from University of Washington, and I've been doing art for all my life technically, but professionally probably for the past 14 years. Now these days, I teach a lot. I teach art. I realized how much I love teaching. It came to a surprise through a residency, actually, I did last year. teaching kids too at that. And it was a lot of fun, a lot of play, a lot of experimentation. The kids were really into it, and it kind of sparked a whole teaching thing up to this point. But aside from that, currently I'm a bee. Currently, I'm exploring the surface, and what I mean by that is I study a lot of Japanese surface decorative effects with gold leafing, using mineral pigments at different grades, like different particle sizes, I guess, and using special effect pigments. And it's a lot of fun. I'm kind of getting into this really deep way of, I guess, playing with the surface in a way that I can play. It's a color and play thing where you can create patterns on the surface to create like a holographic effect. It's a really involved process, but it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of trial and error too, but I think that's the great thing about it. But yeah, and now these days, so the class I teach is acrylic lab, and that also involves a lot of experimentation. There's a lot of rotating techniques and demos. It's the same class, but it's different every time. And it's just something that I just really enjoy doing these days. So.
Thank you so much. We're really excited to have you guys in the magazine. It's some of our favorite pieces. You guys have kind of already heard from me, but I'm a graphic designer. I've always kind of been interested in print design in lots of different aspects. Always loved packaging and art magazines, so it was always kind of a dream of mine to create my own and to work on design in books and magazines. I've been working on design since I went to school for it. I did art all my life and always wanted to do art full time, but design kind of seemed like a very organized way to do it, and just felt good for me. I like having a problem to solve. So design kind of gives me that solution of having a problem to solve and doing art at the same time. So yeah, I really love packaging, publication, branding, love solving all those problems.
Great. And if you pass it back to Lydia, my next question is, how did you hear about Goopy Mag and why did you submit?
So, like we already said, I met Kaylee and Elise in a bar after a Capitol Hill art walk, and I think it was maybe a month later, they reached out to me via Instagram saying that they had this new creative project that they were working on and sending me basically their call for submissions. And from the very beginning, I could just tell that it was going to be really, like, the play was going to be the central focus of what they were exploring. And my work, especially at the time, because I had gone from taking a very long break from making art to really diving headfirst without a roadmap into the creative landscape of Seattle. And it felt like a really good time to play and try something unexpected. So that's how I found out about Goopy Mag, and I was just from the get-go, I think the idea really resonated with me, and so that's why I submitted.
It's funny because I got introduced to the magazine through Lydia, actually. Thank you.
Oh, wait
And,
1 second.
oh.
Since we're talking about like how we got where we got, Julian used to run a gallery that gave me my first art show.
Yay.
And she was amazing. It was an amazing art show. I got connected through Lydia, and then I got connected through Elise and Kaylee. I think it was about like a year and a half, 2 years. Now the result has been great. The hard work really shows. The beautiful glossy magazine. As far as like why I submitted, a lot of the themes that surrounds the magazine resonated with me. I was totally vibing with it. A lot of play. Some of the Japanese art you'll see out there has a lot of playfulness. One of my personal favorites are like the ones that feature cats, cats playing and just being cats and all that. And there's so much of them, among others too. But experimentation. That's kind of the thing. That's kind of the focus in my studio practice, is to just play with different materials. So that resonated with me as well. And just like the whole surrealism of everything, like the colors, the popness of it. And it was a really attractive thing to me. So I'm really happy to be a part of that.
I guess I can.
Yeah. How did you find out about it? So what did you submit to the magazine?
So at the time that Goopy Mag was coming into being, I was transitioning from a studio art practice and really starting to experiment with digital. A big theme in my work is light manipulation, and discovering digital artwork allowed me to use light as the medium. And so the timing worked out so that I was just really interested and excited to have a place to submit some digital work. And so all three pieces that ended up in the magazine are digital paintings. They're really like dreamy lightscapes that are meant to give the viewer a sense of like looking through a window into another world. And some of the shapes and colors were very much inspired by like the idea already of like goopy playfulness. So you'll see if you look at some of the pieces that there are these like wobbly structures and bubbly kind of textures. So there was some inspiration from the premise of the magazine, but also it just perfectly aligned with where my practice was at the time, which was really trying to make these like ethereal mindscapes out of light.
Hold on just a second.
Streaming notes.
I did.
You're so professional.
I have to. Okay. So some of the artworks that I submitted, one of them including one called Sad Day. I actually changed the title of it to Dark Night. There's been a lot of changes since I submitted the art up to now. And I was also in kind of a transitional period myself. I actually took a little bit of a break too since then even. And I was just kind of focusing on teaching art. But in the midst of all that, I didn't really quit art. I was definitely playing with materials and exploring more. And Sad Day, or Dark Night now, was probably the first painting that I've done where I included holographic effects. At that time, I was actually using film. I think it's like a mylar polyester film where you apply it onto the surface of the canvas. And unfortunately, you can't see it in like print as much as I would love it to be. But if you were to see it in person, it's pretty neat. And so I kind of went along with that to explore, also kind of like a play on color and light on a surface and how that can interact with different materials and how that can help tell the story in each paintings too. Another painting would be like the Very Last Supper. It's a horizontal piece composition. It has silver leaf in the background. I play with a lot of gold leaf and silver leaf using Japanese techniques. And it's just like this menagerie of wild characters. I call them avatars. These characters are oftentimes used in different paintings, right? Almost like kind of like those, I think Bubble Yum. I don't remember the name of it, but they had those comic strips, right? And every single comic strips were like a piece of a narrative. And one would assume that there's like a grand narrative, right? There's a world, I forgot what the kid's name was, but you assume that he has a family maybe or something, and it leaves a lot to the imagination, and I think that's an important part of play. So I wanted to kind of make sure that whatever I submitted was something that falls in line with that, and vibes with the whole play aspect of the magazine and the theme, and just the overall silliness of it. I come to realize even up to this point during my break, I was asking a lot of questions of like, who am I? A lot of self-inquiry, I guess is the best way to put it. And it really led to a lot of like cool little realizations, just about human condition and, how to really just take life not so seriously. Because I'm starting to believe that it really isn't. I think life should be play and fun. We should enjoy it, and live it most of all. And so, yeah. I think another one that's really notable. There's a painting. There's a painting of a penguin. I also changed the name of that too, by the way. It's actually part of this current body of work I'm working on, which is called Rainbow Body. I can kind of get into that a little bit more later too, but it's basically this penguin riding on an ice cube, just kind of vibing on the ocean waves, basically, and against a background of gold leaf. Lots of colors and lots of wavy details. I spent a lot of time on that piece. But that piece involved a lot of experimentation in itself too, because I was starting to play with details more. I mean, to a point where it's a little obsessive. Just doing by hand the little waves and all that. I mean, it took countless hours, but it was really well worth it. So.
Thank you. That was awesome. I obviously made the magazine, so that's kind of my submission. But Elise and I did work on a collaborative piece called On Womanhood, and we were just kind of, talking, having some conversations about like what it feels like to kind of move away from friends and have relationships change as you get older. And that's kind of what the piece was about. And Elise and I kind of worked on that together. And mine was just kind of like found photography with some effects and extra graphics, but I thought it really like depicted what was happening in the article that Elise had written about just the changes you go through, especially as a woman with relationships and your body. Yeah, so that's a part I can't talk about.
Great. And for our last question before we have Q&A, what does play mean to you in your artist practice?
For me, in my artist practice, play is all about experimentation. So, as I said previously, my background is very much in experimental studio arts. The idea of experimenting with traditional media in a way that disregards the expectations of how you're meant to use that media is, I would say, like the most direct way that I engage with play. A very tangible example of that is that I'm doing like a lot of ink painting lately, and the inks that I'm using are technically meant for calligraphy. However, I don't even use a brush for them often. I'm making these weird, messy puddles of ink and seeing how that can be like the most sensually satisfying experience for me. And I think that's very similar to how like children first interact with art is really through like the joy of the materials. And so I try very hard in my practice to, anytime I'm introducing myself to a new medium, or even when I'm trying to rediscover a medium that I've worked with before, I'm really trying to release myself from the expectations of how the end result is supposed to look or how I'm supposed to be using it, and explore new ways of doing that. Very much with the pieces in the magazine, that was a beginning of me experimenting with digital work. I don't have a background in digital art, and when I approached those programs that have so many ideas around them about how you're meant to use them, I really did not, I very intentionally did not try to recreate things I had seen or to like look up how it was meant to be used, and instead just explored it like it was a digital jungle gym, and to see whether or not I could make shapes and colors and lights that were compelling to me on like a very base level. So I would say that that is like the main way that I'm playing in my work, and it definitely like I feel like paid off for the pieces in the magazine.
So material science to me is very fascinating. I'm a total nerd about it. And, when it comes to mediums, you have the typical acrylic paint, oil paints, watercolor paints and whatnot. It's kind of cool when you start to discover like the connections between them, and even just materials that's not really conventional, and including like digital painting too. I remember when I first met Lydia, I saw her works and I was engulfed in it, and it was amazing because it's big and huge and with beautiful shapes, and I just love how like manipulating the surface in a way, whether it's digital or using ink or anything like that. I love how that can interact with the viewer. And so, how I incorporate play in my studio work, it kind of, I guess like the new body of work right now, the rainbow body, it kind of embodies that. There's a lot of exploration, going outside of my comfort zone. And there is a lot of uncomfortable parts, but, it always results in something fun and exciting, or discoveries basically. And it leads me to that whole holographic thing, and using lenticular prints and creating 3D effects on surfaces where it's 2D, creating the illusion of like what seems to be 3D when it's not, and things like that. and I really enjoy it. It's like one of the best ways for me to live in the present. When I'm doing art, I'm just on it. You know, sometimes I'll be working nonstop for hours, just playing. And I genuinely do feel like, especially up to this point, after I've been working on Rainbow Body, um, you know, I think if you kind of remember back when you were a child, if you can, um, what you were like, how you were just viewing the world, basically, not necessarily acting like a child, but you know, just how you view the world. I think that's like the most 100% authentic um, way for me to be myself in a way, right? And I can really truly be that when I'm painting, and so that's kind of how I incorporate play into my studio work. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you. Um, I would say I don't think really you could do any kind of design process without play, to be honest. I think it's definitely like an important part of the process. I don't think, yeah. So I would just say whenever I'm working on any kind of project, like maybe like a logo project, like there's a period of time where I'm just playing, just drawing, just testing out things, and like in that time period where you're just playing, messing around, like putting anything down on a paper, even if it's a bad idea or like you think it may be a bad idea, you never know how it's actually going to turn out. So I just think it's a really important part of the process. And within that process, you often make we call them happy mistakes. You make little happy mistakes that are not what you were going for whatsoever. It wasn't even in the vision at all. And it ends up incorporating itself into the final piece of work or into the process at some point, or maybe even later on, part of a brand, part of like a secondary logo, if you'd say, or a pattern within the brand. So there's just lots of places where these little happy accidents and things that you're doing while you're experimenting can live within design. So yeah, I just think it's a really important part of the process. Obviously, it's what I stand for. I made a magazine about it. Yeah, but thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Lydia. Thank you.
I have one last question. And also, we're going to open it up for Q&A. Where can people find your work, and how can they support you as an artist?
My work can be found in person this November at Hologram Gallery in Pioneer Square. I'm doing a solo exhibition there called This Glowing Dark. So that is a couple months out, but it will be a really great opportunity to see my work. Also, just at the end of this month at Bumbershoot, I will be creating an art installation inside of the pole dancing pavilion on the second day. That'll be September 1st. So that will be an opportunity to see my work in an installation context, which is like a big focus for me right now. Online, I have a website. It's just my whole name.com, lydiajewelgerard.com. And then Instagram at perry.sean. It doesn't make sense. There's no reason for it. Don't ask. It's at PERI_SHON. And that is where I do a lot of updates about upcoming exhibitions and projects that I'm working on, like Goopy Mag. Thank you so much. And yeah, if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you. I actually just happened to update my website because I really needed it. And so you can find me at www.julianpena.com. So my last name, by the way, has a little tilde on top of it. It's Julian with an A, and then PENA.com. Or J Pena Studio. That's also my handle on Instagram. I'm really trying best to be better at Instagram, but I will definitely be getting into some new stuff pretty soon in the next couple months. I currently don't have a show lined up right now. I'm just knee deep in studio work and teaching. Again, a lot of experimentation and play, right? I'm just exploring really new things, really fun things. I'm just really trying to figure out certain problems, just like graphic design, I guess, where you're kind of solving problems, right, in a way. I'm doing the same thing with my studio work, and I'm trying to crack that code. And so you'll see that on Instagram when I get better at it. You'll see the new works, and hopefully I can capture some of the cool surface effects on there too. So again, it's jpena, PENA studio.com too. I have that, or julianpena.com, and on Instagram.
I also need to be better at Instagram, so that's a good reminder. You can find my work at Goopy Girls Instagram, which you guys probably know. It's also in the magazine and all over. Goopy_girls. You can also find my work at K Sondheim Design. It's KSON_design on Instagram and KayleeSondheim.com. Yeah, I think are we ready for?
Yeah, are there any questions from the audience? Yes? Sorry, I might need to give you the mic. Procrastination? Okay, that's a great question. They asked what our relationship to procrastination is. Procrastination. Yeah, I think for me, at least, like the hardest thing about our magazine and not having a publisher and it was that it was really up to us. If we wanted it to get done and no one was gonna, I mean, like maybe the people who contributed might be like, because it took us 2 years to make, and we both were working full time the whole time at agency, marketing agency, so super demanding job. And so, yeah, I think that honestly, once we started the fundraiser and we had like $8,000 of other people's money in our hands, we were like, we have to get this done. So I think that for me, at least having something that's pushing you to finish is really important. But yeah, I'll pass it over to you, Kaylee.
Before I forget my thought, it was honestly amazing that we had each other to help us finish the project. Yeah, and also, I just say procrastination, like, it really pushes you to get it done once it is like, all right, I have a due date.
Yeah, give yourself, even if they're artificial, something that gives some urgency, especially if it's a passion project. Julian?
First off, I wanted to give at least Kaylee some props because they understand that I am so bad at Instagram. So they'll reach out to me personally via text. And so I appreciate that. I have a very close relationship with procrastination. There's this thing called virtuous procrastination, right? Where like maybe, I don't know, I have to vacuum. But really, that's not really what you're supposed to be doing. You know, you're supposed to be getting something done by a deadline or whatnot. But you know, I kind of feel like when it gets really close to that deadline, there's a fire under your butt, right? And it really propels you, and it compels me to get stuff done with the best quality as possible. And as strange as it is, because I think most people they are probably good at like being prepared ahead of time, and I admire that. I really do. But for me, oftentimes I do kind of almost wait to the last minute. But when I do, though, I mean, I really go into it, and it's probably the most intense periods of my life when it comes to studio work. But it really drives me. It excites me. It's kind of stressful, but at the same time, like I have fun with it. And again, it's just like a reminder of just like not taking stuff so seriously while trying to get stuff done.
I think that for me, one of the best strategies that I've found to help me balance procrastination is actually to have a really vibrant community. And the more time that I spend around other people who are working on creative projects, the more inspired I become to also take the next steps with my creative projects. And also, when you build like a very active community, and opportunities come up to collaborate with other people that you are excited to work with, those kinds of deadlines where you're working in concert with other creative people can be a really good motivator to get things done on time, to really like rise to the occasion and do your best work with those people because you admire their work so much. And so for me, I think that that's been one of the best strategies that I've found.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to rip off that, but I agree. I think that community is important. One of the things that I have seen too in the art community, a little bit. Thankfully, there's a lot of community, more collaboration. There's this thing called competition, and In the art community, I feel like there might be a little judgments, and it's nothing like something to affect you in a bad way, right? Like I think we're all are unique beings on this planet. I think we are all artists in some ways, right? Even if we're not doing it professionally. It really is kind of beautiful to see within the community, especially if people are kicking butt, with art. I do feel that sense of inspiration, right? And not only that too, like seeing techniques in action live or on the canvas. It also inspires me to think about like what I do with my work. And so I kind of feel like in terms of collaboration and community, the best C's when it comes to that is a lot of inspiration can come from each other. And, I think that's okay. So that's it.
Thank you, guys. Any last questions before we have a design activity? Yes, Alex?
Hi, thank you for the panel. I was wondering if you ever deal with like creativity block or trouble being creative and how you get past that if you deal with it, if like play is part of that. That's really for everybody, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. I think, honestly, having a creative partner of Kaylee has been amazing. I think part of it is I'm not a designer and I don't really like the detailed little things that Kaylee can do. And so I think for me, I'm like more of a big picture person, and being able to brainstorm things with her and her having a completely different skill set than I have really helps us move forward. And really, it's just kind of us hanging out as friends. And then pretty much anytime we hang out, we're probably going to be talking about our work. And so then we'll be doing something and it's like, oh, wait, we could include that in the next issue. Or, there's like a comic expo happening. We're like, we should have a comic in the next one. And so I think kind of drawing inspiration from your life, and also I think just having someone to bounce ideas off of it. That has a very different, like we have very different minds, I think, and the way that we go about things is very differently. And so I think it's nice to have someone who's also different than you in a lot of ways to brainstorm with.
That is like such a relevant question. So for me, after I had completed my academic studies, I went through a 3-4 year period of actually not making hardly any art and really feeling like I was in a terrible creative block, burnt out, and not sure of whether or not I was kind of like fit to like make it in the creative world. So I think that I've definitely dealt with that. And one thing that I would say is if you find yourself in that position, resist making any like decisions about whether or not you are or aren't creative. Like whether or not you are having a creative block, it doesn't really mean that you are or aren't an artist or aren't a creative person. You're just experiencing that in the moment. And another thing that I would say that for me really helped to like move past that period in my life was to diversify my creative outlets. So like I really, in my studies, focused very hard on studio art, and I still think of that as like my main practice. However, like during that time, I got extremely creative with cooking, and that was like a creative practice that was just for me and the people in my close personal circle, and it really allowed me to exercise that creativity without any like pressure for it to be my career or to grow in any kind of like career oriented way. And now as I'm like really fully in the studio art practice, really pursuing that as a career, I still have other creative outlets that help me to like, if I'm stuck, I can still be like actively being creative. I'm a pole dancing instructor and I have like a background in ballet. So a physical creative practice for me has always been super helpful in having just like a totally different way of interacting with creativity that allows me to like use that part of my brain when I'm feeling stuck in the studio arts, and vice versa. When I'm stuck with dance, I go back to painting. So I think like diversifying the different kinds of things you do creatively can be super helpful.
Yeah, I completely agree. When it comes to creative blocks, I think early in my career, I used to, when I have those creative blocks, and if they're really like it feels like a long-term thing, there's been times where I would feel like, oh gosh, in a world full of limiting beliefs, right? Like I can't do this, I can't do that. sometimes I might be like, oh, I'm not an artist or I'm not good enough or whatever. And, I've come to learn that, I am an artist. And you are too, if you say you are. And just because you have a creative block really doesn't mean anything in that sense. It's not a bad thing. It doesn't make you not an artist. I'm not sure how creativity works, right? It just kind of happens, maybe. But just like what Lydia was talking about, for me, it's funny. One of the techniques that I was kind of exploring was inspired from nail art, of all things. And it's like this, I don't even know what to call it, but magnetic pigment, maybe. And it's just, I think it's just like a ferrous iron pigment that's colored, maybe. But it's just really interesting because you could actually create like a chatoyant effect, like a tiger's eye. I don't know if, basically where you're using magnets to suspend the magnetic pigment within a layer of acrylic. And then, oftentimes they would use UV to trap where the pigments lie on each level. And so therefore it creates this effect of chatoyancy, like what you see in a cat's eye maybe. And it's really fun. And I was kind of surprised that I was, I was looking through a magazine and I just happened to see it and I was like, nail art and magnetic pigments. That's really fun, and I think it just kind of comes in the most unexpected ways. And so just like what he was talking about when you're diversifying your what you do in life, right? Whether it's cooking or nail art or, for me, it's science too. I'm getting into structural color right now where kind of like those Morphos butterflies, right? They're not really blue necessarily. They don't have blue pigments, but they have little structures that reflect that blue wavelength in a really pretty way. And that's fascinating to me too, and so that sparks a whole lot of other things. And so I think it's just like action is required, exploration, and again, play. And I think that's when creativity just kind of starts flowing in when you least expect it. So.
Cool. Yeah, I think we need to move on to our next section. Thank you guys so much. And I'm sure they'll be around after for a little bit if you want to ask them questions one-on-one. Yeah, they're so amazing. So our next section is we have a little design activity that Miss Kaylee is going to lead.
So I've done this activity a few times within my design agency. It's just kind of a fun little exercise to get things moving and kind of give you a little taste of visual hierarchy. This is something like most artists know very well, but this is just kind of a simple, fun activity to kind of get the wheels turning, I guess. So I've designed like a super simple poster layout, and you can grab one with a clipboard, and using highlighters kind of to color the page, kind of create some visual hierarchy and play around with how we can make certain words more exciting or kind of communicate the message of play or goopiness or, creative process within that page using different graphics or lines or colors. We have lots of highlighter colors if you'd like to pick a few. Anything goes. And then if we want to kind of swap around and hang out, that sounds great. But just wanted to say before we get really into that, thank you so much for everyone that came and listened to us and has supported the magazine. It means so much to us.
Yeah, thank you. We'll definitely hang around while you work on your activity. Thanks so much for coming. I definitely want to make sure we get that everyone gets a chance to try out the activity and make their own poster. And you can find our work and buy the magazine at goopygirls.com and also, our Instagram at goopy_girls. We are currently working in our minds on the next issue. So we're starting to think about the next issue, which is super exciting. And thank you so much, everyone, for coming and listening. And we'd love to chat about the activities when you're done with them. But otherwise, thanks so much for coming and have a fun design festival.
CAMPBIENT is a sound art residency that takes place in a different state park every year. 24 strangers come together from all over the world to camp out for a few days, immerse themselves in the practices of intentional listening and dialogue, and create a sound art recording from start to finish.
I'm here really to be able to kind of work with other people. I kind of work in isolation a lot, so it's really nice to be around other people that are into the same thing and get different perspectives and stuff. I'm really excited for that.
I've learned the most about making music by collaborating with other musicians, and I think this is a really unique opportunity to collaborate with people that are like maybe in some ways on different wavelengths than I am, although I'm sure also in other ways on the same wavelength.
I'm here for the community. The community this is the first community that I've found that I felt like I actually truly 100% belonged in. And I'm 51 years old. Prior to finding this community a couple years ago, I had never had that experience. So I keep coming back.
I have these sort of I have I guess many disparate backgrounds, but two of them are working a lot in electronic music and technology, and then also being raised in nature. But those two worlds, I haven't really found a way to bring them together. I was going to say reconcile, but I don't necessarily think there's conflict.
You know, we're working with strangers who we just met, so there's a lot of trust, there's a lot of vulnerability, and I love that. I think that's really great for like the collective spirit, and also it kind of like forces us to be present with each other and kind of, you know, not overthink things and really just like make decisions and trust each other to make those decisions with, you know, it's kind of like that whole push and pull of, you know, surrendering and controlling, and also, you know, whatever you're bringing to the table, and also being confident in yourself with what you bring to the group, and try to be, I guess, true to like what you feel your assets are.
Once I learned those things, it became added on as a practice, and all those things really kind of like came together in 2017. I just need to stop doing that. I'm out here with them. I'm in their space. Yo. Like
yeah, I suppose so.
You know, I shouldn't do that. I'm out here with them. You know, this is their space. Next time I'm gonna let it land on my shoulder.
I thought it would be fun to go back and take like a couple of the synths or different instruments and try to like let the light be the conductor, and then try to like play along with the light. So like there's that one where there's like a stylus that you're kind of moving, and, like playing with that and recording it, and then laying that in to kind of represent the movement of light.
Move over a little bit.
I also really like the sound of cans of fizzy things opening. And I also love when I like overhear people speaking like words that I can't hear, but like people who like love each other very much doing their little like coo speech, but like not hearing the words, but just sort of like the tone and timbre of it. It always feels like I'm like getting away with something, and it makes me feel like there's like beauty and love in the world.
The process starts with an ambient field recording in the park. Then, residents are divided up into 4 groups that are each responsible for a track on the record. The groups have free rein to do anything they want with their composition, each with a dedicated producer and engineer to facilitate their creative recording process. By breaking out of the studio and solitary art practice, new possibilities are opened up and new discoveries are made, sonically, socially, and personally.
There's some drony sounds too that we got, and I feel like there could be almost a musical quality, but not over the top.
Subtle.
I mean, that one was I love that one. That was very like, it was like very minimal techno vibe.
Yeah, I heard a kick. I heard a.
Yeah. Okay.
Good job. Yeah, that's great.
Cool.
Great. Yeah,
That's what I was trying to
yeah.
tell you guys what I did. That's the thing. When I was telling you about my installation that I was doing,
different levels.
that's it. Yeah.
I like the way it sounds now. Like it becomes more part of the sound. It feels more part of the space.
It does.
Mm-hmm.
But it's your voice.
And it comes
But it's
back.
also your voice.
Yeah.
Sweet.
I think
that
you
was
can
a
tell
really
it's a
fun
voice,
problem
but it
to work.
also.
Yeah.
What were you in? It was mostly all this like high C, but then I'm just using the modulation to kind of like get to go
You're
up
like
and
a
down.
pitch bend?
Yeah, a little bit, but it's like very like subtle because otherwise it does. It'll sound.
Yeah.
So I had to like
Kind of
like
unnatural.
like push it really hard.
We got live audio coming here.
Didn't want to leave, but I gotta. It's a long way out from Harlem. And I even heard it come with logic on the premises of $1. Didn't want to leave, but I gotta. It's a long way out from Harlem. Yes, I'm here. And I even heard it come with logic on the premises of $1.
Thank you so much.
Oh yeah.
So as we're looking up, try to see if you can, with your ears,
the acoustic part, locate a sound. And maybe it's something that your eyes see movement first and then your ears follow with the sound. Now that we've looked up, there's also sound coming from below.
So if you were to point to where I'm standing based on your listening image right now, where am I standing? I mean, you can kind of see me, but
No, you're behind me.
I'm like right behind you, right?
Right,
Yeah,
exactly,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, so if I come over here.
Now you're on the right.
Yeah, now I'm over on the right.
Well, now you're, wait, talk again?
Yeah. Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2.
You're slightly right.
Slightly right.
Slightly right.
Yeah, and so what's it like now if I keep talking?
You're in my brain, which is
Kind of in your
scary.
head, right?
Yeah.
In the middle of your head, right?
Exactly.
It's freaky, right? Yeah, sorry. Okay, I'm moving out of your brain right now.
Okay, cool. Well, I really want to thank you. I know it's late and it's been a long day, but I'm actually getting a lot of energy and like active vibes from you right now, so it's time to take on a history presentation.
I mean, with sound, one of the really interesting things with sound is that as far as the senses go, it's always too late, right? Like sound is in you and in your audience and in your collaborators before you can decide whether or not it's going to go there. You can close your eyes, you can close your mouth, you can hold your nose, but yeah, with sound, it's always too late. And I think that affords not a dangerous situation, but certainly a vulnerable one, but it reveals the edges that can make the biggest difference for us in our lives and in our work. A lot of people go to nature sounds to like relax, and I like that, but I'm generally like, bring it on. Like when I go to nature, I want to go to the edges. I want to go to the places where climate change is really showing up. I want to go to the edge of the marsh where the frogs and the birds are competing for the same frequencies. I want to go to the edges because that's where life, energy, and growth happens. And none of that happens without sounds. So I had the good fortune to go down in a submarine and listen. And what I found was the submarine, I was thinking it was going to be quiet. Submarines are not quiet at all. But I did learn the importance of having a visual experience of the sounds that you want to preserve, right? So getting humanized down there to see what's happening below the surface of the water for me was really profound. And through going down in the submarine, what I learned is that sometimes our edges need to be more defined than others for our personal safety. But in a submarine, that's one thing. But in walking around in the world, even with the dramatic climate events that we experience now, it's often our comfort zone that defines those edges and not the edges themselves. So one thing I invite you to investigate over, maybe tonight, maybe more tomorrow, is where are the edges here in the framework of CAMPBIENT? Where are the edges here at Miller-Sylvania State Park that are interesting to you?
By creating an inclusive, low-barrier space, CAMPBIENT explores the possibilities in providing adults from any background the opportunity to play, to imagine, and create. Living and working together in a compressed and intense time period, residents hone their skills in problem solving, conflict resolution, and community building, all the while practicing the future to imagine a better society. CAMPBIENT is an ongoing collaborative investigation into community, the natural environment, and sound art, all from a perspective of the commons, our shared public lands and cultural spaces.
Hi, folks. Let me see if I can go mobile. Thanks, everybody, for coming today. This is a new talk. We'll see how it goes. Design is connection made manifest as a talk. I'll see if I can be ambidextrous and click and use the microphone at the same time. Hopefully you can see the screen pretty well. Most of what I'm talking about will just be replicated on the screen anyway, but if I may, if you can see the screen, just the briefest of introductions. My name is Justin Dauer. I am the founder of a small design agency called Anomali by Design. I'm a lifelong Chicagoan, so you'll probably hear some Chicago drawl on some of my words as I go through this. I've written a few books on design, which I'll shamelessly self-promote at the end in some capacity. And I love Seattle. I was actually here just a couple weeks ago for vacation with my family, so beautiful city. And if I may, I'd like to begin from outer space, which you can't really see, but it's zooming in on something that's very near to me, which is the cup of coffee. And Seattle has absolutely awesome coffee, and I think Chicago does, but I think you have us whipped. And the cup of coffee has a lot of meaning to me. In the morning, it's kind of like a pick-me-up. In the afternoon, it's also kind of a pick-me-up. But at night, it gets that rally creative energy going. It kind of forces me to slow down a bit, which I appreciate during the course of the day. And it also meant something to my grandfather. And this is not my grandfather, this is a stock photo. But on the south side of Chicago, my grandfather lived with my grandmother. They didn't have the best relationship, so he kind of lived in the basement and she lived upstairs. But when he would come upstairs in the morning, she always had his cup of coffee sitting on the table for him. And his Chicago Sun-Times newspaper sitting there as well. And, he was a very active guy. He was in construction for years. He was always going. But this was a point in his day which I appreciated. And I wasn't into coffee at that point, obviously, because I was like 10 years old, where he would just slow down, drink his cup of coffee, read his newspaper, and do nothing else. And as a kid, who was playing with my action figures and running around, like just that concept of slowing down, pausing with intent, I found absolutely fascinating. And there's an interesting echo to that in Swedish culture. Slowing down to have a cup of coffee. It's called fika. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with this. Fika essentially means to stop in the middle of the day, stop working, and meet with somebody and just not work. Have a cup of coffee, have a piece of cake. And this is so important to many Swedes that they have this written into their contract, that they can take a fika during the course of their workday. And I worked for a Swedish agency as a director of design for about 5 years. So I've been to Sweden a lot of times. When I first saw that, it absolutely melted my brain, being an American worker. What is going on? These people aren't chained to their desk. They're stopping and they're going outside in the middle of the day and they're having coffee. And there is a coffee magazine called Drift. You can't read this, so I'll read it for you. It encapsulates coffee culture in Sweden quite well. Quote, "In our fast-paced world, where we are constantly on deadline or planning our schedules around meetings and events, we crave opportunities to slow down. Swedes actually embrace those opportunities." So it's a cultural thing, and it's a beautiful thing. Pausing with intent and slowing down is a value. And a value is essentially anything you deem important to you in terms of how you create and how you work. What if we were able to align our values to the way we create and the way we work in an American environment or globally? What would that look like? You see, values aligned means connection aligned. I'm going to use the connection word a lot in this talk. But before we can align our values, we have to be able to define them. And I'd like you to think about points in your life when you felt you're most fulfilled. What has given you energy? What has charged you up? And I have some examples here to kind of get the creative juices flowing. For example, is it the act of helping people? Learning from your mistakes? Utilizing your gifts? Giving back? Let's take a look at some of these. Have you ever been outside and someone has asked you for directions, and rather than pass them by, you felt compelled to slow down and give them those directions? Why did you feel like you had to do that? Perhaps it's because you've been that person before, and you know what it feels like to have to put yourself out there under times of duress. Putting ourselves in the shoes of someone else and trying to understand how they feel is all about empathy. To err is human, as Alexander Pope famously wrote, and there are effectively two ways to respond to a mistake. We repeat the error, and we're doomed forever to kind of make that same mistake, or we learn, and we process, and we evolve. You have focused on your evolution and changing for the better. This is all about growth. Utilizing your gifts. Sometimes checking things off a list, a metaphorical list or a literal list, feels good, right? You're taking care of things, and you're getting it done. Other times being pushed satiates something deeper. Putting together a tough puzzle, running a marathon, assembling some IKEA furniture with your partner. This is all about challenge. And lastly, the oxytocin boost we get from doing things important to us and donating our time feels good. And that's no mistake. Giving back feels good for a reason. You enjoy looking beyond yourself and trying to make the world a better place. This is all about making a difference. Prioritizing our values is of equal importance because we can't assume we're going to enter an environment. I'm going to pause for this plane to go over. We can't assume we're going to work in an environment that's going to check all the boxes of our values. So sometimes understanding what we're going to satiate more rather than less, or what we can live without, is essentially a key thing when we're looking for a new role. So in a business environment, and you can't see this too well, we've all probably been part of a forced ranking exercise in a workshop where essentially you come into a room, you're with a lot of stakeholders, and you kind of write out key features for an MVP or something for launch. And everything usually kind of has the same importance to everybody. And you ask people to raise their hand and you say, what's the most important thing? People say everything is the most important thing. And that's what makes this a tough exercise by design. And you essentially have to put dots at either end and say, this is important to me or this is not important to me. And then at the end of it, you kind of ask people who put what dot up there, and you get some really fun, constructive dialogue. I would like you to consider doing this with your values, because at the end of the day, sometimes maybe a diverse and inclusive environment is the most important thing, or working from home is the most important thing, or having flexible time or flexible hours is the most important thing. So to have that laser focus on what is most key to you is essential. And prioritizing your values helps you in a myriad of ways, and it helps inform your interview questions where you're going into the office. Like I said, asking about, is this an inclusive environment? What does your board look like? Is it diverse? Objective gut check. When you feel the connection to your environment waning, it helps you kind of understand, are my values, are these boxes being checked? And lastly, operating and what is alignment and most important to you? Is this environment operating in ethical unison to my core values? Does the printed swag or the slogan on the wall actually operate in unison with how the organization is working in actions over words? And the next step is aligning that to an organization. This is a broken down house, and it says fixer-upper with great potential. And a lot of organizations wear their burnout culture on their sleeve when you're looking for a new job. Are you a self-starter? Do you have comfort and ambiguity, which means they don't have their act together? This is essentially real estate speak for how this organization is working. This is a fixer-upper with great potential. And some organizations are very transparent about it. Some kind of use marketing speak to kind of get that past you. But we have to be key and very observant when we're aligning our values to these job descriptions. Is the salary even posted? I mean, there's a million ways to kind of dissect a job post. Oh, good, there's a cloud. Now we can see the screen. Culture fit is a swear word very often. And it's a swear word when it's business to potential employee because that is used for exclusion or bias. On the inverse of that, culture fit from employee to role is very much a valid concept because maybe we don't want to forego our work-life balance. Maybe we don't want to sleep on a cot overnight because the organization values output more than they do our personal lives. What if we were able to create an environment of harmonious value alignment and support and inclusion and creative exploration? And a lot of organizations will start their new hire on Monday, right? That's the classic thing. You come in on a Monday, they plop the HR manual down, or you go into training, or God forbid you're thrown in right into a project right away, which has happened to me. When I've led organizations before, design organizations, I'm looking for a different energy. One that doesn't span 5 days of the week, one that spans 1 day of the week, and that's a Friday. And I like to call that Friday the new day one. And if you're a designer, this will definitely resonate. Why do we create personas in design? Across research and demographics information and actually talking to people, personas are an attempt to empathize with who we're creating for, to give a soul to the design process. And we can give a soul to the hiring process by breaking it out into 4 distinct parts that I consider very people first and human centric. First, acclimation. When somebody comes in, and we've probably all been in this spot, when you enter the door, come through the door on the first day, and there's no one there to greet you. And you see people kind of milling around and talking about what they watched over the weekend. You feel very small because that energy from signing on the dotted line to walking in the door has been a complete disconnect. When I've hired somebody, my butt is out of my seat, metaphorically or literally. And I'm there to greet them. And I'm there to show them this is where the mother's room is. This is where you can work. Here's where the couches are. Here's when people take their breaks. So it's a demonstration of my values straight away. I am there to help people, and I'm there to connect with them, and I'm there to show them I appreciate them joining the organization and entrusting me with their support and their growth, which is a non-trivial thing. Conversation, fairly standard. When you join a new role, you hope they take you out to lunch, but it's not like, where do we go? Oh, it's noon. Can we get reservations? Everything is teed up. I've already called. I've already had reservations made. I already let the organization know we're probably not going to be back for a bit. So it's incumbent upon me as a manager at that point to let the organization know and set all those points of opportunity up in advance. Inspiration, I'll come back to in a second. Reflection at the end of the day, I'm not saying, okay, this is a great lunch. Let's go back and get back to work. I like to cut the day at that point, and it's, we hire people on a Friday for a reason. I want them to go back on the weekend, and I want them to talk to their family. I want them to talk to their friends and generate some organic marketing and really just think about a hiring experience that was hopefully different than anything they've experienced before. But what I want to go back to with specificity is inspiration. And inspiration is not a swear word in design. I feel like things have gotten so commoditized and productized and dehumanized that we can't pause for inspiration, or like bringing inspiration into the design process is almost considered taboo, which in many ways, and I don't think it's naive to say, kind of melts my brain. What matters is where the inspiration is coming from and how it's ultimately utilized back into the design process. And if you can't see this image too clearly, this is some wireframes. And, you know, when we're looking at a portfolio of work, there's some standard things we're looking for when we're going to hire somebody. Is it, you know, like what involvement did you have in the project? What were the trials and tribulations? What were the successes? How did you contribute? What did you learn? And that's great learnings, of course. What I'm looking for when I bring someone into my organization is spatially, what has gotten them into the field of design? What about the environment has influenced who they are and how they create? So when we're having that conversation part, and we're at lunch or we're having coffee, I'll ask this new team member a question. And I'll say, take me someplace in the city that inspires you. And I've gotten, you know, deer in headlights looks. I've gotten immediate answers. Sometimes people have had to think about things. I'll usually have something teed up so I could take people to something. But more often than not, they do take me someplace. And on the left is some graffiti on the side of a train platform in downtown Chicago. On the right is a view of the Chicago skyline from the south of the city by the Museum of Science and Industry. And on the left here is a view of a park called Dearborn Park, not too far from where I live in downtown Chicago. And on the right is a view of the Field Museum. And, you know, we're not just going to those places and I'm like, oh, this is cool. Okay, let's go back to work. We want to go deeper than that. A lot of this is about going deeper. So, for example, the graffiti on the train platform. I asked, why are you taking me here? Why are we looking at this? And it was really, I hired this person in February, so we were kind of freezing our butts off out there. Why am I here? And they told me a story about how they were driving their husband to work before they started the day, very early, like 5 a.m. And they would always see, as they were driving, this particular piece of graffiti at this particular point along the journey. And it always grabbed their eye for some reason over and over and over. And this, to me, intimated observation, and this person was a researcher on my team. The view, the second one there, the view of the south of the city. This employee was in banking, and they knew they liked helping people, but the environment of banking was not the best fit. And they decided to take a grand leap and make a complete career shift. And they had a child to take care of, and they went to UX boot camp, and they knew they wanted to connect with people empathetically through creativity and design. And that's the story they told me there. This is all about empathy. Detail, this view in the park, you can't really see it too well, but it's this distinct view between a couple of trees where you can see this, the way these flowers change. And this particular view is framed by these trees in this V shape very beautifully. And they would kind of comment on how they saw how those flowers would change in the spring and the summer and the fall, and the leaves would fall off. This to me was all about attention to detail, this very specific view framed out very particularly. And lastly, the Museum of Science and Industry. This employee who was a researcher said their family would take them there when they were younger, and they would kind of puzzle over archaeology and kind of digging into things deeper and uncovering things literally and metaphorically. And they were a researcher, and that kind of, the way of thinking, that way of being fueled informed their entire career. So when you think about the way an organization works and what they have in their PowerPoint slides and what they put in their website or what they put in their swag, you have to ask yourself, in actions over words, does this match the story they tell everybody else? Now, that's a one-off, right? That's the new day one. That's on a Friday. And that's kind of a cool thing. I've done a lot of podcast interviews and dialogues, and that has resonated with a lot of people, that new day one thing. And if that was it, that would be great, I think. But I think we can do better than that. And I'm looking for inspiration and creative energy that kind of carries through the week, carries through the term of employment, carries through the term of doing our work. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And I run this meeting with my clients and my team members when I've managed teams, called Creative Inspiration Wednesday. And Creative Inspiration Wednesday has 3 pillars behind it. It serves to humanize our clients or team members, consistently recharge our creative energy, and stimulate alternative thinking and solutions. And it looks something like this. And you can't really see it. There's a bunch of people looking at a TV screen in a wide open office space, very relaxed, and we're looking at something on a TV screen. And Creative Inspiration Wednesday, we stop working at 9:30. And this happens, like I said, when I was managing teams, and now when I'm working with clients directly, I bring clients into this process, which is kind of interesting because you think about client work being very transactional, but they're people, and I want to understand what influences them and what are they going to bring to the table. But in this instance, in design capacity, people share what has inspired them the previous week. That could be something they ate. It could be a piece of music they heard. It could be a movie. It could be something they read. And we show it on the screen, and then people ask questions, and we ask about it. And what it does is it helps humanize this person more than an email address or more than a brief passing hi in the hallway. And it helps me understand their creative thinking and what has inspired them and what are they going to bring into the process. And some examples on the left here, there's a bunch of these knitted patterns on the floor, which I would say are about, 8 inches by 8 inches. And one of my team members, who was my accessibility expert, had a kind of a lengthy commute from the suburbs into the city. And she would knit these massive things on the train every day, going back and coming forth. And at the end of this process, she made this massive quilt that she brought in to kind of show us what she had put together. And then I said, I had a son coming, and she brought like a scarf and a hat that she had knitted for him on the commute, which I thought was incredible. Oh, we have a brief cloud here. Good. On the right side, you can see I was at the Illinois Railway Museum, which is a train museum a little south of Chicago. Excuse me. And I had taken pictures of the logos, which had very much inspired me as I was walking around. And, my kid's clinging to my leg, but I kind of made a point to kind of look at the logos and the iconography and the colors. And that really charged me up. And I shared that with the team. A jazz album that one of my more senior illustrators was listening to at the time. I think one of those fellows played in the bands at Disney. It's called the Firehouse 5+2. So he just played a couple tracks and we listened to those. And on the right, this fellow on my team, this senior designer, brought in a mix board, and he was kind of like doing some sound design and cranking some tunes for us, which I thought was really cool. And the cool thing about this is, we were the designers and we had the design space. This is an office, but a PM would be walking by, or like a VP of finance would be walking by, and they'd kind of pause and be like, what are these folks doing? And then the next week, the VP would be in our session, or this PM would be in our session. They would tell someone, their teammate, and then the meeting kept kind of growing exponentially, which is not only great, but it helps other leaders and other folks within the organization view their team members as human beings as well, which I think is a very non-trivial thing, and it shouldn't be. And what this does is, obviously it humanizes our teammates, but it helps the quality of our work stay stronger because our energy is always vibrating at a different level. And I know that sounds a little new agey, but I genuinely believe that fuel begets energy and energy begets quality. And we can go even deeper than that. There's constant spatial and human-centered and people-first energy all around us. I mean, look at this space right now. There's inspiration everywhere, which I think is fantastic. Color-wise, tactile construction-wise, thought behind the pieces wise. There's all these things we can kind of capture and take notes on and bring back into our creative process. An example of that in Chicago, and I brought my team and some clients to this as well, there was this exhibit called the Truth Claim exhibit at the Carrie Seacrest Gallery. And Truth Claim was an exhibit about deconstructing the medium of photography by photographers. So there were all these different installs, and you'll see this better in the video recording later on. These installation pieces that you can kind of walk through and touch tactily and see how these photographers view their medium and how they deconstruct it and bring it back into their craft. And I had the gallery owner kind of take us around, and there was nobody there at the time, and kind of walk us through the pieces. And again, at the end of this, I'm not saying, wasn't this cool? All right, let's go back to work. We went to a cafe, and we talked about what we saw. And we connected about this. And we were challenged. I'm very open and humble in receipt of feedback. Did you get something out of this? Did you think I was full of it? Was this a waste of your time? Largely, people didn't think I was full of it, which is great. But we connect about this. And then, again, on that reflection point, day's over after this. Go home. Go back to the gallery. Think about what you had just seen. I want to be respectful of these people's time. It's valuable time, and I want them to think about what they had just seen. Coming back, this is another picture of Creative Inspiration Wednesday. The following Wednesday, we talked about what we had seen the previous Wednesday. And we talked about how we might bring this into our craft, or if that was worth our time. And we got some good learnings about that. Now, one thing you'll notice I haven't mentioned in the last, 50-something slides is tools. Digital tools with specificity. And I feel like you can't look at a job description now if you're a designer, and if you don't know Figma, you're not getting in the door. Which I both understand and don't understand. And which is interesting to me is that the designer's legacy is not built upon their choice of tools. The designer's legacy is built upon the choices they make, as macro and micro as that implies. What if we created an environment that was tool agnostic, where medium was a means to an end, and we didn't have to use specific digital tools based on the organization's expectations? Where AI is an arrow in our quiver rather than the archer themselves. And we're able to break the stagnation of the current web. You can just see boxes here, but that's essentially fine, where it's a hero image at the top, a search bar, 3 generic icons down below, and content, which probably informs 90% of the modern corporate web design. Meaning we're not married to any given tool along the way, and these are app icons. There's Illustrator, Photoshop, XD, etc. Allowing us to shift the procedural narrative more to this in terms of creativity. Medium agnostic, which is very key to how I create at my agency right now. And yes, there's crayons up there, there's an eraser, there's origami, there's pencils. Whatever is going to charge the creative process and get people's energy flowing is what I'm most interested in. Legos is a very common business thing right now in workshops. I think that's kind of stayed at this point. And we're not coming in, and this is a big binder with a line through it, we're not coming in and laying down the consulting 101 binder, and I'm saying this is how we work. These are the exact steps we're going to take. I think that's big consultancy kind of approach to kind of come in and say this is the 11th commandment chiseled in stone. I think you're unmalleable at this point. You're already kind of locked in your way of creative thinking and problem solving. And systems that can seem as limiters initially, and this is, I'm talking about design system, it's actually a pattern library, but systems that seem like they should offer fluidity and creativity actually lock us in. And we'll talk about why we feel that is. And it's interesting, be it an app icon or a website or a poster in a concert venue, design is solving the problem of engaging people, agnostic of circumstance, to connect and convey an experience. And I think that's a massive privilege and responsibility that we have to take on as designers. And what is design, if not connection made manifest? I genuinely believe that. And this can manifest itself in different ways, where tool is the limiter. This is an old app, and I'm going to date myself here, from the 90s called ResEdit. I don't know if anyone knows what ResEdit is. I see a head nod there. Awesome. ResEdit was when Macs were in OS 0.75 and all these extensions would kind of load at the bottom of the screen. ResEdit was the clunky app that would edit the resource forks of these old apps. There's a bunch of, no binary code, 1s and 0s here, and this very rudimentary screen to the right. And ResEdit was clunky because it did a lot. It was kind of a Swiss Army knife of apps. And one of the things it did was make icons. And this is a screen you probably can't see too well, but an OS like 7.5 user of iconic pandemonium. And there's a bunch of windows open. Icons are very small, 32 by 32 pixels. When this OS was out, I was, I don't know, maybe a junior in art school, the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And I found this problem to be the most interesting thing in the world. This 32 by 32 pixel, 256 color, 8-bit icon that not only had to compete with, iconic pandemonium, but also had to fit into a suite of icons to kind of look the same. I thought this was the distillation of visual communication in its purest form. And so I began to toil and figure out what could I do with this medium to make it my own. And you can't see it too well, but this is my friend the old-fashioned here. And, you know, how can I not make it flat? How can I intimate depth? How can I use dithering to kind of, you know, make a gradation from one color to another when the other values weren't there? And there was this really interesting community at the time of design icon designers called Iconists, global icon community, and we would push each other, challenge each other, and kind of figure out the coolest ways to create. And I still do that today. These are some icons I still create with, and when I have creative block, this is super hipster. I have an old Mac, and I'll go back there and I'll go to ResEdit, and I'll make icons in this clunky Mac, which takes up too much space in my small office in our downtown Chicago condo. And that's, you know, that's an extreme example. Not everyone's going to ResEdit. They're going on their Performa in their office and sipping their espresso like I do. There's more practical examples to this. I was a VP of design at CVS Health for about 5 years, and we were acquired. We were a company called B-Swift, and this is again, you can't see this. This is a picture of the B-Swift office. B-Swift was the name of the business as well as the product. And this is what B-Swift looked like. If you've been with an organization and you have enrolled in healthcare, there's a good chance you use this product. It's everywhere. It's largely white label. It's not going to be called B-Swift. It's going to be called, you know, Bob Corp Healthcare System or something like that. But by and large, this is pretty ubiquitous. It's pretty much everywhere. I'm going to do a little scroll here so you can kind of see the screen. You'll see it better in the video broadcast, but it's life events. It's documents. It's enrolling for healthcare. It's everything a company would kind of want to throw to start screen. So it's busy, and it was 14 years old by the time I had become the VP of design here. And I wanted to redesign it, long story short. And this was the subsequent screen where you would actually select your healthcare plan. And you had kind of gone through a questionnaire at this point, entered in, you know, what are you in network, out of network, any pre-existing conditions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the screen would spit out all these plan pods. And I'm going to scroll here. Can't see it too well, you will in the video broadcast. But plan pods are an encapsulation, these horizontal boxes that kind of show everything I just described. There's a pretty good call to action on the right, but it's tons of data, very minuscule, and just not intuitive and not very usable, not very accessible. Again, a 14-year-old product at the point. I wanted to redesign it, but you can't just do that in a vacuum. And you can't start big either. You kind of start small. So I asked my team to start with this, the plan pod. Let's just think about the plan pod and figure out what we could do with that. What we found was, over 14 years, there were about 75 different versions of a plan pod. So I had my team. This is one wall. All four walls of our creative space was covered in plan pods. Some were horizontal, some were vertical. Some had this, some had that. Some had a button here, some had 3 buttons. We were trying to figure out where were the commonalities, what had to be there, what didn't have to be there, what was extraneous, what was vital. And like I said, this is the core of this enrollment product. I couldn't do it in a vacuum. So what I did was, and this is a workshop setting. I'm standing right here. There's a screen right here and some people down here. I flew stakeholders in from all of our offices across the country to kind of walk through what do we want to get out of a redesign of enrollment. Is it generating new leads? Is it sales? Making people happier? Increasing our dreaded NPS? So we went through that workshop process. My team is here going through some post-it notes, exercises on the wall. I could see someone wrote more cowbell. That's very funny. And from that, we generate personas, like I said earlier, giving a soul to the process, not just from the workshop learnings, but we started to talk to people who are engaging with our product, people who are using it. What are their goals? What are their income levels, as much as they can tell us, pre-existing conditions, etc. Again, to try and actually connect and communicate with these folks that we're building for. And then this is a journey map, like I said, to give a soul to this process. We're applying a persona to this map. We overlaid an empathy map on top of that because we can't assume people are going to be happy at every single step of the way. Where is there too much information? Where is there not enough information? Et cetera, et cetera. Armed with all this information, research, personas, workshop learnings, dialogues with people, potential clients, my team ended up hitting this, the brick wall. That's a brick wall. And we jumped right into our digital products at that point. I think we were using Axure, just another digital product that made stuff move. And what we found is it locked things down too soon. We had reams of data, reams of learnings, but we started looking at, it was like high fidelity UX, which is a challenge. And people were getting too into the font sizes right away and just not looking at the building blocks of what we were trying to do here. Hierarchy, what has to be there, what can't be there, what are the actions that are essential at any given point. So I had my team go back to this. Not the cup of coffee, but yes, pausing with intent. Slowing down. This wasn't an internal deadline. I was the one setting this internal deadline, so I made sure my team had comfort to slow down. I went to other stakeholders and said, this is going to take us a little bit longer. And we went back to this. More specifically this, my favorite tool of all, the pencil and paper. Allowing things to be rough. Ideas need to be rough. Intimating hierarchy via different lead weights, via boxes. Don't worry about font sizes. Let's just place boxes on a piece of paper and see where they fall. So the space in our office went less from printouts to sketches, mobile first sketches. And we don't talk mobile first anymore, but to me, the spirit of mobile first is key. Distilling what we absolutely have to see at any given point, action-wise, information-wise, placement-wise. And we had, reams and reams of sketches. This Post-it note right here says Final 3, so we had kind of whittled it down at the end of the day. And we ended up with this, which you can hardly see, but in a digital capacity, we went with a vertical alignment on these plan pods. One call to action. On the left side here is a little animation showing displaying information only when a user put the onus on themselves to view it. If it's like very sub-information, not flooding everything at once. Our little decision support tool, which we call Ask Emma, was kind of presented down here in a Siri capacity, a very ubiquitous capacity, leveraging ways of working that we know people already know how to use with their phones. And this is all fueled by the pencil and paper in a Fortune 5 setting. So when we think about the brick wall and lack of fresh eyes or stagnation, or we think about design systems which inhibit freeform creativity. But that's great. They are designed to inhibit freeform creativity, but that doesn't mean the system itself can't be creatively designed to allow for more engaging presentment and typographic use and bold use of color. Or we think about the modern web where 90% of corporate sites are a hero image and a search field and 3 generic icons down below. Can we go crazy with high bandwidth design at this point? No, because we have to be mindful of not everyone having the latest iPhone or having an advanced speed connection. But that's why progressive enhancement exists, because we can design for the smallest viewport and then progressively enhance the experience up. So these things that seem as limiters actually help us distill down to creative ideation and purity of concept and theme, allowing us to get more like this. Big, beautiful, bold design, beautiful typography, engaging colors, which you can't see too well, but more often than not defying the current stagnation of the modern web. I said I would get a little self-promoting at the end. I've written a couple books. One is called In Fulfillment, The Designer's Journey, which talks a little more about fulfillment. One is called Creative Culture, which talks about culture as well and how to best connect with people. The new day one is very much represented in that. My design agency is Anomali by Design. Very much practice how we preach, and now this talk was done. And that's what I have, everybody. Thank you. Plenty of time for questions. If anyone has any thoughts, like I said, I'd very much welcome thoughts. If anyone thinks you got something out of this, if you think I'm full of it, I would definitely welcome that dialogue. I'll also be milling around if you don't have anything now. Oh, you have a question right here.
Sorry, I think you might need to meet your halfway. Awesome. Whoa, sorry. Hi, I'm Kaya. I actually am a recent graduate from the University of Washington, the Master of Human-Computer Interaction and Design program.
Awesome.
It was really cool to hear your talk, or at least the last half, and like see the similarities between like what my program has taught me versus like what you're actually doing in the design world. I was wondering your thoughts on personas, just because like I know some of my professors love them, some of our professors were like they don't like them, so I was wondering your thoughts.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for that. The question was, if anyone didn't hear it, what I think about personas in design. You make a great point. They fall in and out of favor almost weekly. I feel like. I think we need to empathize with who we're creating for in some capacity. If it doesn't manifest as a persona, it could be research. It could be guerrilla, like just talking to people out in the field and seeing what they feel and what their pain points are and what their goals are, what their outcomes might be. And we can ask that in certainly a more human way of doing it. I still feel personas are fine. And I feel like the design community is especially talented at ultra scrutinizing ourselves and our output. And now it's all Figma, and if you use anything else, you can't use Illustrator anymore. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous at this point. So I feel like demonstrating compassion and generating empathy for who we're creating for is essential. And if it manifests as a persona, great. If it manifests itself as some notes I've taken and talking to somebody, that's also great. But I don't think I have that level of scrutiny on artifacts or points along the process to kind of discount personas. I think they're perfectly fine. But designers are really good, and design field is really good at kind of beating itself up and ultra scrutinizing things. So I'm curious, do you feel personas are valuable, or? Sorry.
I used them for one of my service design projects that we did, and I thought it was very helpful doing like the primary and secondary personas, just so we know like who our target audience is and like what it could possibly affect for them, like for two different types of personas. So I thought it was pretty helpful.
Good. Yeah, good. Happy to hear that. Great question. Thank you. Anybody else? All right. Thank you, folks.
Hi guys, my name is Grace, and today I'll be talking to you guys about the future of connecting communities through creative technology. So today we will be discussing what creative technology is and how emerging technologies like augmented reality as well as user-generated content gaming platforms will be essential to the future of how we build connections for communities. We'll talk about best practices and things to consider when designing for these mediums, as well as some trends and new developments. I would encourage everyone to imagine what if future ways of facilitating human connection, perhaps using some of these technologies that I'll discuss or others that you may be interested in, and then commenting your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to turn this into an asynchronous discussion with you all. First, a little bit about myself. I am a creative technologist with a background in architecture, marketing, and editorial. So a lot of different things there, but funnily enough, I'm actually now using all of these different skill sets in my job. I'm from Hong Kong originally, and I studied business and marketing for college. And then I worked as a writer and editor at a few magazines after that. I hold a master's in architecture. And during my time in school there, I did a few interactive design classes where I became really interested in designing at the intersection of the physical and digital environments. And that's what led me to my path as a creative technologist. So you might be wondering, what is creative technology, since I've mentioned that a few times by now. It's a pretty broad field, and I found that that definition can kind of vary quite a lot depending on the organization. But essentially, you can tell from the name that it's really a mix of creative and technology. So it's the combination of technology with artistic and design skills to create new experiences, products, and solutions. It's something that can enhance traditional creative methods, unlock new ways of expression, and inspire and improve design and experiences. Although I work for a marketing agency, it can be used in many different sectors and industries, including for businesses and also for more purely artistic approaches. My career is dedicated to designing and creating interactive environments across virtual and physical platforms with the goal of connecting communities. So I'm currently a senior creative technologist at an experiential marketing agency called OBE, Onboard Experiential, and we're based in SF, LA, New York, and London. My roles there typically involve a combination of the creative use of technology, 3D design, and strategy, and I play a role in tying multiple strands of project and client parameters together to create unforgettable interactive activations. I'm usually involved throughout project cycles, so anywhere from the very beginning when we start pitching to clients, and then through concept development, design development, working with vendors on fabrication and production, all the way to on-site implementation. So in my field, a lot of our work involves the bringing of communities together through creating an experience for them to come together, either physically or digitally or something in between. And then there it's an opportunity for them to engage in something shared. Some of my project highlights as examples include creating a virtual 3D environment for a global beauty event for a huge beauty brand, an augmented reality future dining experience at a food festival, as well as an augmented reality exhibit for the Ville neighborhood in St. Louis. In my experience, the most impactful projects that I've worked on are instances where we pretty much had to use creative technology to bring people or stories together. That's when it really clicks and it really makes sense to integrate technology into these events and experiences. So for example, with the project that I just mentioned for the Ville, that's something that we couldn't have done without creative technology because we couldn't have told the story of that community without their direct involvement. And the use of augmented reality allowed us to showcase audio recordings and archival photos and quotes in a way that was more integrated with the physical space that a different audience was in. And that was the only way to create a really multi-dimensional experience, sort of bringing these things across space and time almost. And it was a way for us to give enough credit to the community that we were speaking about. So now let me just get into some basic definitions to make sure that everyone is on the same page. Some of these terms are kind of relatively new, so there might not necessarily be agreed upon definitions, but just for a broad idea of what I'm speaking about when I use these terms. So what is augmented reality, which is AR for short? I have a little snippet from Google AI Summary, which puts it a lot better than I ever could. But they've said that AR stands for augmented reality, which is a technology that adds digital elements to a real-world environment in real time. This can include sounds, graphics, text, and other virtual enhancements. Augmented reality can make a user's experience more immersive and enjoyable and can help them understand or enjoy something more. Personally, I believe that AR is an essential component to the future of how we're going to experience the world, and therefore also how we're going to interact with each other. Currently, there are already a wide variety of use cases in the experiential industry, from things like discovering new layers of information, virtual signage and navigation, unlocking content in a gamified way, playing like augmented reality games, to enhancing the design of the physical space with virtual elements. So there's an example here on the slide from the Singapore Tourism Board, where they created an immersive AR guided tour to explore the city in a new way. This was done using the Google Geospatial Creator, which I'll dive a little deeper and later down in the presentation. But this is just one type of augmented reality that is anchored to a physical location. And there are a lot of other types of augmented reality that can be triggered, for example, by scanning an image, or on the flip side, you can also kind of track your face or body movements for a different kind of background to augment onto. And then another definition that I wanted to talk about was for virtual immersive environments. So these are computer-based simulations that allow users to navigate and interact with a 3D environment that may be real or imagined. This can be in the form of a custom-built virtual environment on the web that you access on your computer or phone, or it can be experienced as a full-on virtual reality with a headset, where you feel like you have actually stepped into that world. These virtual environments can be pretty much anything you imagine. So they can be something completely fantastical, or they can be really close to real-world experiences, scenarios, or environments. They can also be used for many different purposes, including things like education, entertainment, and training. So industries that are kind of dedicated to all these different use cases of virtual reality. So definitely a lot to dive into further there if you're interested. Another type of virtual environment would be user-generated content game platforms. So something like Roblox or Fortnite, which you might have heard about. If you haven't heard about them, they are a little harder to purely describe. So I would suggest kind of just going on the web and taking a quick look at them. They're free to access. But Roblox, for example, would define themselves as the ultimate virtual universe that lets you create, share experiences with friends, and be anything you can imagine. So the reason why these are known as user-generated content gaming platforms specifically is because they allow users to create, share, and monetize digital content for games, which kind of adds a whole other layer to that community building. And then finally, there are a lot of overlaps and commonalities in these two areas through the broader umbrella of the metaverse, which I also felt like I had to mention here. The word metaverse has been kind of overused by Meta previously in the past couple of years, but there isn't really an agreed upon definition of that word yet because it's still very much in development and it exists outside of the Meta ecosystem as well. It's more broadly thought of as kind of the next 3D version of the internet. And in the future, this could be a network of online worlds in which we experience physical, augmented, and virtual realities that interact with each other. So that's why this is kind of like a more overarching concept over the augmented reality and virtual immersive environments. This is a really rapidly growing space, so a really exciting place to be at. According to Statista, in 2023, it was estimated that that market stood at 94.1 billion USD. And then in 2024, it's expected to rise to 130 billion before surging to over 1 trillion US dollars by 2030. So even though the term metaverse has kind of lost its momentum a little bit in the past year as AI became a lot more of a trendier term, I think that this does really feel like, even though there are uncertainties, this is the direction that the internet and how we experience computers and human-computer interaction is moving towards in the future, with more spatial and 3D ways of experiencing the digital world rather than the 2D version that we have had thus far. So how does this connect to the topic of connecting communities? How do we use these tools for different groups of people to interact. So the general trend that we're seeing here is a rise in the demand for digital content. And this is where people are spending their time. So this is where we kind of have to go to reach people. Social augmented reality is one category of AR with more immediate implications on how they can be used to connect communities. So examples of this would be Snapchat or Instagram or TikTok. These are all social media platforms that people already spend a lot of their time socializing, but they all also have the capacity to create AR layers and experiences. So these were built to create and share content, but they also are offering more and more immersive capabilities now. And so that creates an opportunity for users to create content that is more exciting and imaginative than perhaps just a traditional like video recording or image photo taking, but more of something that can fully immerse the user as well as the audience by using their face, their body, and their environment to bring these things to life. And then the second thing that I wanted to mention is web-based AR. So this is a little bit different from social AR because it allows for more custom web-based experiences where we can create more extended content that kind of goes beyond these walled gardens of social platforms. There are a lot more limitations in the social platforms because they are under these broader social companies, but with web AR, there's just so much freedom in whatever you want to create. So as I mentioned, I worked on a project where I built an web AR experience that brought to life the history of a community to another audience and location. And that was something that would not have been possible on social AR, that is possible on web AR. And then lastly, for virtual immersive environments, in the case of UGC gaming platforms, this is where an audience or a group of people may already be spending a lot of their time. So for example, Gen Zers spend a lot of their time on Roblox. And they may also form smaller groups or subcultures depending on their interests. In the case of more custom-built environments, a 3D virtual space can provide a place to meet other like-minded individuals live, very importantly, and that feels, in a way, a lot more immersive than just a text chat or a discussion forum or other asynchronous methods of connecting. So this is much closer to how we would interact in real life with a digital avatar that represents you while being able to surmount the challenges of time or cost to travel and meet someone in person. So after all of that background information, now that we're all kind of aligned there, I wanted to speak to some best practices or just considerations to think about in using these platforms for connecting communities. So whether it's your kind of first time delving into these platforms, and there are so many free tools out there to explore, or if you're a little further down the road, these are just kind of some things that I've experienced as being important things to think about as you're designing that user experience, as you kind of go through the different steps of concept and design development to implementation with the input of developers. So first is selecting the right tool or medium. The most important thing I think is to be strategy first. So this is instead of being technology led, where you start off by just thinking of what kind of technology you want to use there, what's like kind of buzzworthy or trending, but instead you want to first start off with thinking about what are your goals and who is the audience or the community there. So in other words, we want to be picking the technology to match the audience and not the other way around, because not every trend or every technology will work with every audience. And so, for example, we've seen most recently that a lot of clients might just say something like, oh, let's find a way to incorporate AI. Can we just like include an AI photo booth? But there may be, in fact, instances where it doesn't even make sense to use technology, where it could create more distance instead of connection. And so it's really important to start off by thinking about the goal of what you're trying to do. And then after that, thinking about how you can use technology in a way to achieve those goals. And then a kind of sub bullet within that is to select the right platform after selecting the right tool. So say you've decided to create a virtual immersive environment for connecting this particular audience. And so in that case, you then have to think about what is the right virtual platform to use. So you could use something like Roblox or Fortnite that already have kind of a built-in audience. So even between those two platforms, they would have different demographics in their most typical users. Roblox tends to skew a little younger, a little more creative, while Fortnite attracts players who are a little bit older and may enjoy more action. On the other hand, for a previous project that I've worked on, we ultimately decided to pick a custom created platform instead of using one of those, because there's some limitations in Roblox or Fortnite. For example, it doesn't let you link out to other external websites that easily. And so in that case, we worked with another vendor who had kind of their own custom developed platform. And then we completely customized that with our own designs and creative, and then added on new custom built features as well. So that a more custom solution can offer a lot more flexibility in terms of what you're trying to achieve, but sort of at the expense of not having that built-in audience. And so, as I said, it kind of really comes back to the goals that you're trying to achieve there. And then content. This one, content is like such a big piece of whatever you're trying to build, whether it's augmented reality or virtual immersive platforms. I think a really important learning for me there is collaborating with communities for authentic storytelling. So as a designer or creator, it's just not really possible for me to tell a story in the same way that someone who experienced it firsthand would be able to do so. And so the impact of being able to like actually hear the voice of someone who experienced the stories that you're trying to tell, or to connect audios to specific visuals, that's something that I think like whenever it's possible to really integrate these people into the entire process. And then thirdly, considering the ease of use. So there are a lot of kind of learning kind of not barriers, but people have to go through a couple of hoops to get accustomed to the experience, especially if they haven't done it before. So we have to make sure that whatever we're building, the experience has been tested by a couple of other users who might not have done it before, but designing that kind of onboarding or instructions process so that it's really quickly and easily understood. Another thing to consider is making use of common UI elements or interactions, such as gestures, like the swiping gesture that's so common. These are things that everyone is accustomed to and is kind of a part of like basic vocabulary. And so it would be a lot easier to utilize these rather than coming up with something completely new. And then another part of this is coming in with the expectation that people will not be spending an extended time with whatever you're building, even though you might have taken months to create something. In reality, people will likely spend like maybe at most 10 or 15 minutes if you're lucky. And so that kind of goes hand in hand with making the onboarding process really easy and making sure that everything can be played with or experienced in very short and easily accessible amounts of time. And then shareability is another consideration. That one is pretty obvious, so I won't dive too deeply into that, but that is like one really great way to just kind of extend or expand your experience to a much wider audience, even if they might not be able to see it firsthand. And then accessibility and device compatibility. So a couple of different considerations here, but accessibility, for example, we have to design for different senses. So in the augmented reality neighborhood tour that I mentioned, we simultaneously had visuals, we had captions, we had the audio tour. So just like kind of all of these different ways to engage your content so that there's a lot of built-in flexibility there. And then designing for a global audience. So there are, in the case of like a virtual platform, you might have visitors from all over. And so thinking about like the different languages that you might want to have content captioned or dubbed in. And then also planning for different levels of tech engagement. This is something that might be more applicable to the augmented reality side. But for example, we often have assistants on site when we're activating so that we can kind of help out people who are less familiar with the tech and kind of just really guide them through the process, but just not coming in with the assumption that people necessarily already have experience with these platforms. And then finally, device compatibility. So just kind of as much as possible, designing with the built-in flexibility for different and older devices across different platforms. And then testing, that's super important. So testing early and often, again, with different devices and users with different levels of expertise. But that's definitely a lesson that I learned in terms of the in-person environment being different from the testing environment as well. So just kind of building in a lot of time throughout the process, and then that enabling you to iterate really quickly and build on learnings to improve. And then lastly, just making sure that the experience is fun. So often you can get kind of like pigeonholed or like really deep, sorry, not pigeonholed. You can get really deep into building out and designing the experience to the extent that you kind of forget the perspective of the user. And so regularly it's important to zoom out and just kind of think from the perspective of, is it fun? Because if it's not fun, people will not be using your product no matter how much effort you've put into creating it. Finally, I wanted to just quickly go through some overarching trends that we're seeing for future directions of these emerging technologies, just kind of things to keep in mind as you explore them further and the impact that they might have in the future. So the 5 trends that I wanted to quickly talk about are how generative AI is enhancing workflows and user experience, mixed reality headsets gaining more momentum, new paradigms for user interaction, improvements in positioning, mapping, and body tracking. And then finally, for designers, this one is a really cool development, the introduction of more and more no or low code tools. So in general, these developments are making experiences a lot more immersive and enjoyable for the audience, and or cheaper and easier for designers and producers to create. So that means that these platforms will become more ubiquitous, and then we will increasingly find different communities coming together here. So with generative AI, we are seeing a lot of these tools for text and image generation. So I've personally been using them a lot for the early concept development stages with the AR and immersive virtual environments. There's a lot of 3D asset creation involved there, and AI still has a ways to go in that area. But as that kind of develops, we're going to see that becoming a lot easier for people to create, and the barrier to entry is going to become a lot lower. And then we are also seeing a lot more AI powered tools in some of the social AR platforms that I've spoken about. So TikTok Effect House, for example, has generative effects, or Snapchat Lens Studio also has the ability to create filters with ChatGPT prompting. And then mixed reality headsets gaining more momentum. So that one, where we saw kind of Apple release their Vision Pro and Meta release their Quest 3. And so we're seeing these significant investments into mixed reality interfaces by major tech companies. What that means is that these headsets will continue to become more comfortable and cheaper for people to use, which means that they will become more ubiquitous. Another thing to think about is that these headsets are going to create new ways of communication and connection. So, for example, Apple's Vision Pro personas was one way that they tried to address that. It was, I think, a little awkward for most people. And this kind of challenge is not necessarily a good or bad thing, but it's something that designers will have to address in bridging that gap between a person being immersed in their virtual environment or in a headset and then switching to chatting to someone next to them IRL. But on the other hand, this also offers new opportunities. So, for example, imagine if you could meet someone at a networking event and then your AR glasses can pull up some overlapping interests and tell you what would be the best talking points. Third, spatial computing, creating new paradigms for user interaction. So this is kind of a follow on from the previous trend, but the introduction of spatial computing is really exciting because it just allows us to think about human-computer interaction in a whole new way. So for example, for Apple, in place of hand controllers, they've introduced new interaction behaviors like eye tracking, hand tracking, or voice control. These may take some time for people to adjust to, but they're a lot more intuitive and similar to our natural movements and behaviors in the real world. And so they're going to open up a lot of fresh possibilities in how we interact with people and objects digitally. And then fourth, improvements in body tracking and scene understanding. So social AR platforms, they're constantly releasing new features and tools. Their understanding of the body tracking on the front camera side as well as on the back camera side in being able to accurately understand different elements of a scene. All of that is constantly improving so that they can kind of figure out what is a wall versus a floor or a ceiling, etc. So all of this is just kind of showing a trend towards a fuller understanding of our environment so that we can make these digital elements blend in a lot more seamlessly with the physical. And then beyond social AR, we're also seeing this in more general AR developer tools. So Google, for example, released the Geospatial API, or Niantic, which is known for creating Pokemon Go. They have a web AR development platform called Eighth Wall. And they also released something called Lightship VPS, which makes it a lot easier for people to anchor their content. And just generally for these systems to understand your position and mapping within a space. And so we are actually seeing, because it's becoming so much easier for people to use these tools, we're seeing them come into play a lot more in real life events where people come together. For example, in football stadiums or concerts, places where there are large gatherings of people, they are kind of creating this extra layer for people to improve their experiences. And then finally, with more and more no or low-code tools for building these experiences, it's easier than ever for designers to play around with them and explore them. For example, the Geospatial Creator that I mentioned by Google, there's a plugin with Adobe Aero that you can try where you can create 3D animations and then just drag and drop them into an outdoors physical space in this kind of like Google Maps view, which is super cool. And then there's also Snapchat Lens Studio or Meta Spark Studio, which have been around for a while. And then Fortnite Creative Mode, Roblox Studio, Unity, and Unreal. All of these are platforms that you can play around with as a designer. And even though you will still need scripting to create more complex game logic, there's still a lot of fun things you can do with building a world and exploring. And there are also options like visual scripting that you can use to kind of make that code writing a lot easier. And so with all of that said, I think that with connecting people, it's still super important for us to meet in real life, and there's nothing that can kind of replace that. And in our industry, I'm still seeing a lot of experiences being grounded in physical space, but the ability to augment these with digital components or to kind of bring them to a broader audience with a virtual extension is bringing really exciting possibilities for all of us to connect in a wider way. And so with that said, I would invite all of you to imagine what the possibilities are and comment your thoughts below. Thank you.